The crystal chandelier above me fractured into 1,000 pieces of light, each one spinning as my knees gave out. I tried to catch myself on the marble pillar, but my fingers slipped, and the cold floor rushed up to meet me. The last thing I remember thinking was that dying in a 5-star hotel lobby was somehow worse than dying in the filthy basement I'd escaped from 3 hours ago. My legs had been shaking for the last 20 minutes. Small tremors at first, barely noticeable as I moved through the Waldorf Astoria lobby with my head down, my borrowed coat pulled tight around my shoulders. The coat was 3 sizes too big, stolen from a laundromat on 42nd Street when the attendant stepped outside to smoke. The jeans didn't fit either. Nothing fit anymore. I'd lost track of how much weight I'd shed. 20 pounds? 30? My hip bones jutted against the denim, sharp enough to hurt when I moved wrong. The yellow shirt underneath was mine, though. One of the last things from before. Before I became inventory. Before I learned what it meant to be called merchandise. The lobby was warm. Too warm after 3 hours walking through December cold with no real destination. Just away. Away from the basement on the Lower East Side. Away from the locked door and the mattress on concrete and the men who looked at me like I wasn't human. My body couldn't regulate temperature anymore. Couldn't do much of anything except hurt. I'd come here because places like this had security, cameras, witnesses. I thought if I could just make it to someone in uniform, someone official, I could whisper the words "help me" and it would be over. Someone would call the police. Someone would care. But the security guard at the entrance had looked right through me. His eyes had swept over my face, lingered on the bruise flowering across my left cheekbone, the split in my lower lip that had scabbed over badly, and then dismissed me. Another street person wandering in from the cold. He'd already started moving toward me, one hand rising to gesture toward the door, when a group of businessmen entered behind me and his attention shifted. I'd slipped past while he was distracted. The lobby stretched before me like a cathedral. Gold and cream marble, Art Deco fixtures, the kind of elegant excess that used to make me stop and stare. Back when I was Evelyn Braun, 19-year-old college freshman, political science major, girl who actually believed she'd change the world someday. Back when I had a future that extended beyond the next 5 minutes. My reflection caught in one of the massive mirrors lining the wall. I looked away immediately. Couldn't bear to see what 2 years had done. Couldn't bear the hollow eyes, the way my collarbones jutted like broken wings beneath my shirt. The purple-yellow bruises on my throat that looked like someone had tried to strangle me. Someone had tried to strangle me. Twice. Both times I'd survived by going limp, by playing dead until they got bored and moved on to something else. The fever made everything distant, made the lobby feel like it was underwater, sounds muffled, lights too bright and too dim at the same time. I'd been running a temperature for 3 days now. The infection in my ribs, where the boot had caught me during my escape, was spreading. I could feel it. Could feel my body losing the fight. I pressed one hand against my side, felt the heat radiating through the thin fabric of my shirt. The skin was swollen, angry red spreading out from the point of impact. I needed antibiotics, needed a hospital, needed things I couldn't have because the moment I walked into an ER, they'd ask questions. They'd call the police, and the police would put my name in a system. Vincent would find me. He always found the ones who ran. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, trying to clear it, but the chandelier overhead kept fracturing into starbursts of light. The floor tilted. I reached for the marble pillar to steady myself, fingers scrabbling against polished stone. Then the crowd changed. I'd learned to read crowds during my captivity, learned to track movement, to identify threats before they materialized, to know when someone dangerous entered a room by the way everyone else reacted. Survival skill. The kind they don't teach in college. The business people moving through the lobby, the hotel guests, the staff. They all shifted at once, like water parting around something sharp, like prey animals catching the scent of a predator. I looked up. He moved through the lobby like he owned it. Tall, easily over 6 feet, dressed in a brown suit that probably cost more than I'd made in a year before everything went wrong. Dark hair swept back. Sharp features. The kind of face that belonged on old Roman coins. Beautiful in a dangerous way. In a way that made you want to look and look away at the same time. But it was the tattoos that marked him as something other. Ink crawled up from his collar. Intricate black patterns that wrapped around his throat and disappeared beneath his shirt. I'd seen enough criminal tattoos during my time in the basement, enough clients with gang marks and prison ink, to recognize organized crime when I saw it. This wasn't street level. This was power. 4 men flanked him. 2 ahead, 2 behind, moving in perfect synchronization. Security. The kind that didn't advertise but didn't need to. The kind that killed efficiently and disappeared bodies where they'd never be found. I should have moved. Should have stepped back, melted into the crowd, made myself invisible the way I'd learned to do. But my legs weren't working right anymore. The tremors had spread from my thighs to my knees, and the marble floor was tilting again, listing like a ship in rough water. The man in the brown suit was 20 feet away. 15, 10. His eyes were dark. Not brown, something deeper. Black coffee. Oil slick. The kind of dark that swallowed light. And then those eyes landed on me. Everything stopped. I saw the exact moment his expression changed. Saw the casual dismissal in his gaze shift to something else. Something cold. Something lethal. His eyes swept over my face, down to my arms, to the bruises I couldn't hide because they covered every visible inch of skin. His jaw tightened. One of his hands, tattooed knuckles and silver rings, curled into a fist. I knew that look. Had seen it before in the basement. Right before Vincent decided someone needed to be taught a lesson. Right before the pain started. My knees gave out. The floor rushed up. I had time to think, this is it. This is where I die. And then there were hands catching me. Strong hands, surprisingly gentle, breaking my fall. I looked up into those dark eyes, now inches from my face, and watched his expression turn from cold to something worse. Something arctic. Who did this to you? His voice was low, controlled, but I could hear the fury underneath. Could feel it radiating from him like heat from a furnace. I tried to speak, tried to say please help me or I escaped or don't let them find me. But the words wouldn't come. My vision was tunneling. The lobby shrinking to a pinpoint of light surrounded by darkness. The last thing I heard before everything went black was his voice, colder than anything I'd ever heard, giving orders in Italian to the men surrounding him. Get the car. Call Dr. Romano. Tell him we're coming in hot. Then the darkness swallowed me whole, and for the first time in 2 years, I stopped fighting it. Before we find out what Dustin does next, and whether Evelyn survives the night, hit that subscribe button. Because this story gets darker, more intense, and more surprising than you can imagine. You won't want to miss what happens when these two broken people decide to burn an empire to the ground. Dustin Johnson had seen enough broken bodies in his 27 years to recognize a signature when he saw one. The bruises on her arms weren't random. They formed a pattern. Thumbprints on the inside of her biceps, 4 fingers wrapped around the outside, restraint marks. Someone had held her down, held her often, held her hard enough to leave bruises that layered over older bruises in a timeline of abuse that made his blood run cold. But it was the cigarette burns on her wrists that confirmed it. 3 on each arm. Precise. Evenly spaced. The kind of methodical cruelty that wasn't about information or punishment. It was about ownership. About marking property. Vincent Marcello's signature. Dustin had seen it before. 6 months ago. On 2 bodies pulled from the Hudson. Girls who'd tried to run from Vincent's operation. Girls who'd been made examples of. He'd thought he'd burned that particular operation to the ground after he'd broken from his former mentor. Thought he'd sent a clear enough message about what happened to men who trafficked in human flesh. Apparently Vincent hadn't received it. The girl in his arms was barely conscious, her body temperature spiking through the thin fabric of her shirt. Infection. Malnutrition. Christ. She couldn't weigh more than 100 pounds. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. The kind of respiratory pattern that preceded collapse. Hotel security was moving toward him now. The same guard who'd nearly turned her away at the door. Dustin watched him approach with the kind of cold calculation he'd learned from his father. The man was already reaching for his radio, already forming the words that would bring more uniforms, more questions, more complications. Dustin shifted the girl in his arms, cradling her against his chest, and let his eyes meet the guard's. Didn't say a word. Didn't have to. The guard's hand froze halfway to his radio. Whatever he saw in Dustin's face made him take 2 steps back, hands rising in a placating gesture. Smart man. The girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. Brown eyes, fever bright, unfocused. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear. Don't, she whispered. Please don't. She thought he was taking her back. Thought he was one of Vincent's men. The realization hit him like a physical blow. I'm not going to hurt you, he said. But she was already gone again, consciousness slipping away like water through fingers. His driver, Tommy Chen, was already at the entrance, the black Mercedes idling at the curb. Marcus appeared from the lobby crowd, his lieutenant's eyes taking in the situation with the kind of quick assessment that had kept them both alive this long. Boss? Move, Dustin said. Tommy had the back door open before they reached it. Dustin slid into the leather interior, keeping the girl cradled against him, her head lolled against his shoulder. Up close, he could see the infection spreading from her ribs, the red lines tracking up her side. Sepsis. She had maybe 24 hours before it killed her. Marcus climbed into the front passenger seat, already pulling out his phone. "The estate," Dustin said, his voice cold enough to frost the windows. "Now. And call Dr. Romano. Tell him it's urgent. Tell him I need a full trauma team standing by." Tommy didn't ask questions. The Mercedes pulled away from the curb, slipping into Manhattan traffic with the kind of speed that would have gotten anyone else pulled over. But the NYPD didn't pull over Dustin Johnson's cars. Not if they wanted to keep their pensions. Dustin looked down at the girl in his arms, at the bruises, at the burns, at the evidence of 2 years of systematic torture written across her skin like a language he knew too well. Vincent had made a mistake, a fatal one. He'd left a witness alive. The first thing Evelyn noticed was the softness. The mattress beneath her body didn't have springs digging into her spine. The pillow under her head wasn't stained or torn or smelling of mildew and fear. The sheets were clean. Cotton, high thread count, the kind that whispered against skin instead of scratching. The second thing she noticed was the light, not the bare bulb that had swung from the basement ceiling, harsh and unforgiving. This was natural light, filtered through what sounded like fabric, casting everything in shades of cream and gold. Morning light, or maybe afternoon. She'd lost all sense of time. Panic hit her system like ice water. Her eyes snapped open. She tried to sit up, but her body refused the command. Every muscle screamed in protest. The infection in her ribs sent white-hot pain radiating through her torso, stealing her breath. The room swam into focus slowly. High ceiling, crown molding. Walls painted a soft gray blue. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. All dark wood and elegant lines. A window. An actual window with curtains. Gauzy white fabric that moved slightly in air that smelled clean. This wasn't the basement. This wasn't anywhere she recognized. Terror clawed its way up her throat. Where was she? How did she get here? The last thing she remembered was the hotel lobby. The man in the brown suit. Those dark eyes looking at her like he could see every broken piece inside her. The man with the tattoos. The criminal. The one who'd caught her when she fell. She tried to move again, tried to swing her legs over the side of the bed, but IV tubing caught her arm. She looked down. Someone had changed her clothes. The stolen coat and jeans were gone. She was wearing a white cotton nightgown, soft and clean, and her left arm was taped to a board with an IV line running to a bag of clear fluid hanging from a portable stand. Someone had undressed her. Someone had seen everything. All the bruises, all the scars, all the evidence of what had been done to her over 2 years. Her breathing came faster, shorter. The heart monitor she hadn't noticed before started beeping more rapidly. The door opened. A man entered, not the one from the lobby. This man was older, 60 maybe, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He wore slacks and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. A stethoscope hung around his neck. "Doctor," her mind cataloged the details automatically, old habits from her pre-med classes rising up through the fear. "You're awake," he said, his voice gentle. "That's good. You gave us quite a scare." He moved toward the bed slowly, hands visible, movements telegraphed, like he was approaching a frightened animal. Maybe he was. "My name is Dr. Anthony Romano. You're safe here. Can you tell me your name?" Evelyn's throat was dry. She tried to speak, but nothing came out except a rasp. Dr. Romano reached for a water bottle on the nightstand, one with a straw. He held it out to her, waiting until she took it with her free hand before letting go. The water was cold, clean. It hurt going down, but in a good way. In a way that reminded her she was still alive. "Evelyn," she finally managed. "Evelyn Braun. Evelyn." He nodded, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "I need to examine you. Is that all right? I'm going to explain everything I'm doing before I do it. If you want me to stop at any point, just say the word." She wanted to say no. Wanted to scream at him to stay away, to not touch her, to let her go. But she could feel the fever still burning through her system, could feel her body shutting down piece by piece. "Where am I?" "You're at a private estate in Westchester County. You collapsed in the Waldorf Astoria yesterday afternoon. Mr. Johnson brought you here for treatment." Mr. Johnson, the man from the lobby, the one with the tattoos and the cold eyes and the fury that had radiated from him like heat. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why would he help me?" Dr. Romano's expression shifted. Something that might have been pity, might have been anger, I think that's a question better answered by Mr. Johnson himself. But first, let's make sure you're going to survive to hear the answer. He spent the next 20 minutes examining her with clinical efficiency. He was good, she realized. Gentle but thorough. He explained every touch, every test, every observation. When he lifted the nightgown to examine her ribs, she saw his jaw tighten. The infection is severe, he said quietly. Sepsis. Another few hours and you would have been beyond help. I've started you on broad-spectrum antibiotics, but you're going to need at least a week of IV treatment. He catalogued her injuries like he was building evidence for a trial. The fractured ribs that had healed badly, the cigarette burns on her wrists, the ligature marks on her ankles, the bruises in various stages of healing, the malnutrition that had stripped her body down to nothing, the vitamin deficiencies, the dehydration. How long? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. 2 years. She heard him take a slow breath, heard him set down his tablet with more force than necessary. When he looked at her again, his professional mask had slipped. She could see the anger underneath. 2 years, he repeated. And you escaped yesterday? She nodded. You're incredibly brave, Evelyn. She almost laughed. Brave. She wasn't brave. She was broken. She was used up. She was barely holding herself together with spit and spite. Movement at the door caught her eye. The man from the lobby stood in the doorway. Dustin Johnson. Up close, in better light, she could see the details she'd missed before. The sharp line of his jaw, the way his dark hair was styled back from his face, the tattoos that crawled up his neck, intricate patterns that looked like they told a story in a language she didn't speak. He wasn't looking at her, though. He was looking at Dr. Romano's tablet, at the list of injuries displayed on the screen. His expression was completely still, frozen, but his hands, those tattooed hands with their silver rings, were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Dr. Romano stood. She needs rest. The fever should break in the next 12 hours if the antibiotics work. Dustin nodded once. Curt. Controlled. The doctor left, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Silence filled the room. Evelyn's heart was racing again, the monitor betraying her fear. She should say something, should ask questions, should demand to know what he wanted from her, what price he'd extract for saving her life. But he spoke first. His voice was low, controlled, but she could hear something underneath it. Something volcanic. Something barely leashed. No one will touch you again. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. A law he was laying down, immutable as gravity. He turned and walked out, leaving her alone in the enormous bedroom with those 4 words echoing in the silence. For the first time in 2 years, Evelyn Braun closed her eyes and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she might actually survive this. 5 days passed before Evelyn could sit up without the room spinning. 5 days of IV antibiotics, of Dr. Romano checking her vitals 3 times daily, of meals delivered on trays that she could barely finish. 5 days of sleeping in a bed so comfortable it felt obscene. 5 days of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because men like Dustin Johnson didn't save women like her out of the goodness of their hearts. There was always a price. Always something they wanted in return. She just didn't know what his price was yet. He came to see her every evening, always at 7 o'clock, precise as clockwork. He'd knock once, wait for her acknowledgement, then enter and take the chair by the window. He never sat close to the bed, never crowded her space. Just sat there in the fading daylight, sometimes reading through papers, sometimes just watching the grounds outside. The first 2 nights, he didn't speak at all. Just sat there for exactly 30 minutes, then left with a quiet goodnight. The 3rd night, he brought questions. The basement where you were held, he said, not looking at her, keeping his gaze fixed on the darkening sky beyond the window. Can you describe the location? Evelyn's hands tightened on the blanket. She'd known this was coming, known he'd want information, known that nothing came free. Lower East Side, she said, her voice stronger now than it had been. The antibiotics were working. Her body was remembering how to fight. Between Delancey and Rivington. I don't know the exact address. They always brought us in through a back entrance, through what used to be a restaurant kitchen. Dustin pulled out his phone, made a note. His movements were economical, precise. Everything about him screamed control. How many rooms? 3 in the basement, a main area where they kept us during the day. 2 smaller rooms in the back. Her throat tried to close around the words, but she forced them out. 1 for clients, 1 for punishment. She saw his jaw tighten, saw the muscle jump beneath his skin, but his voice stayed level. How many girls? 15 when I escaped. It used to be more, 20, sometimes 25. But girls don't last long. They either escape, die, or get sold overseas. And the ones who die? There's an incinerator in the sub-basement. Industrial. Left over from when the building was a garment factory. Dustin made another note. Guards? 4 during the day, 6 at night. Shifts change at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. They rotate. But there are regulars. Marco is the day supervisor. Big guy. Scar through his left eyebrow. Enjoys the work too much. At night it's usually Tony running things. Younger, nervous, checks his phone constantly. She saw Dustin's expression shift slightly. Interest, maybe. Or recognition. Tony Marcello? The name hit her like a fist. She must have made a sound, because Dustin's gaze snapped to her face for the first time since he'd started questioning her. You know him, she said. Not a question. I know his father. Dustin stood, moved to the window, keeping his back to her. The setting sun cast his profile in sharp relief, highlighting the tattoos that disappeared beneath his collar. When he spoke again, his voice was colder than she'd heard it. Vincent Marcello was my mentor. Taught me everything about this business when I was 16 years old. Strategy, negotiation, how to read people, how to inspire loyalty, how to eliminate threats. My own father was too busy expanding into legitimate business to pay attention to the family's traditional operations. Vincent stepped in. Became the father I actually respected. He paused, one hand bracing against the window frame. I worked under him for 7 years. Learned that he was brilliant and brutal in equal measure. Learned that he valued strength above everything else. And I learned that some lines should never be crossed. Evelyn waited. She could feel the anger rolling off him in waves, barely contained. 6 months ago, I discovered what he was doing. The trafficking operation, the girls. He'd been building it for years, right under everyone's noses, using family resources and protection for his own empire. When I confronted him, he told me it was just business. That I was too soft. That my father had made me weak with all his talk of legitimacy and public image. Dustin turned to face her then, and the fury in his eyes made her breath catch. I gave him a choice. Shut it down, release the girls, walk away, or I'd burn everything he'd built to the ground and scatter the ashes. What did he do? He took my father's territory, my father's resources, half the family's soldiers, and disappeared, declared himself independent, started a war that's been bleeding both sides for 6 months. And apparently, he kept the trafficking operation running the entire time. The pieces started falling into place. The way Dustin had looked at her bruises, the cold fury when he'd seen the cigarette burns, the immediate recognition. You thought you'd destroyed it, Evelyn said quietly. When you went after him 6 months ago, I hit 3 locations, freed 40 girls, killed 15 of his men, sent a message that should have ended it. His hands clenched into fists, but Vincent's always been better at hiding than I gave him credit for. He must have moved the operation, kept it smaller, kept it quiet. He did. After your raid, everything changed. More security, more cameras, more rules. We weren't allowed near windows, weren't allowed to speak to each other. Anyone who broke the rules went to the punishment room and didn't always come back. Dustin crossed the room, stopping a careful distance from the bed. Close enough to see her face clearly, far enough that she didn't feel trapped. I need more information, Evelyn. Everything you can remember. The clients, the guards, the schedules, the suppliers. How they move the girls, where they take them. Who pays the bribes to keep the police away. Everything. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why do you care? You're a criminal. You've probably done terrible things. Why does this matter to you? Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or regret. Because I failed, he said simply. 6 months ago I thought I'd stopped this. Thought I'd saved those girls. But you're proof that I failed. That 40 girls walking free meant 15 more still trapped. That my war with Vincent has been about territory and pride while people like you suffered for it. He pulled the chair closer, sat down so they were at eye level. You're right. I am a criminal. I've killed men. I've broken laws. I've done things that would horrify most people. But I have lines I don't cross. Children, trafficking, forcing people into slavery. His voice dropped to something almost gentle. Those are Vincent's sins, not mine. And I'm going to make sure he pays for every single one. Evelyn studied his face. Looked for the lie, the manipulation, the angle. Found nothing but truth and cold, patient fury. There are still girls there, she said. 12. maybe 15 by now. They bring in new ones every few weeks. They're terrified. They think no one's coming for them. They're wrong, Dustin said. Someone is coming, but I need to do this right. No mistakes this time. No chances for Vincent to slip away again. Evelyn took a slow breath. Felt something shift inside her chest. Something that had been frozen for 2 years starting to thaw. Then I'll tell you everything. And she did. On the 8th day, Dr. Romano removed Evelyn's the 4th line and declared her out of immediate danger. The infection had cleared. Her vitals were stable. She'd gained back 6 pounds. Though she still looked like a strong wind could knock her over. He recommended another 2 weeks of rest, physical therapy to rebuild her strength, and trauma counseling when she was ready. Then he left her alone with Dustin Johnson and a choice that would define the rest of her life. Dustin waited until the doctor's footsteps faded down the hallway before speaking. He stood by the window as always, backlit by morning sun, his expression unreadable. "You're well enough to leave," he said. "So we need to discuss what happens next." Evelyn had been expecting this conversation, dreading it. She'd spent the past 3 nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what he'd want from her, trying to calculate what price she'd be willing to pay. "I have connections," Dustin continued, still not looking at her. "Federal prosecutors who owe me favors. Marshals who can disappear people when necessary. I can have you in witness protection by tomorrow morning. New name, new city, new life. Vincent would never find you." It sounded perfect. It sounded like salvation. It sounded like everything she'd dreamed about during 2 years in that basement. So why did her stomach twist at the thought? "Or," Dustin said, finally turning to face her, "you can stay. Help me finish what I started 6 months ago. Help me destroy Vincent's operation completely. Every location, every guard, every client, every dirty cop on his payroll. Burn it to the ground so thoroughly that nothing can ever grow back." There it was. The real offer. The price. "You want to use me as bait," Evelyn said flatly. "No." His voice was sharp, almost offended. "I would never put you back in that position. Never. What I want is your knowledge. You spent 2 years inside that operation. You know things Vincent doesn't realize you know. Patterns, routines, weaknesses. Information I can use to hit him where it hurts most." He moved closer, stopping at the foot of her bed, his dark eyes locked on hers. "But I won't lie to you about the risks. If you stay, if you help me, Vincent will eventually find out. He'll know you're alive. He'll know you're working with me. And he'll come for you with everything he has. And if I run, if I take your witness protection, then you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. New name doesn't mean new life, Evelyn. It means hiding. It means never contacting anyone from your past. Your family, your friends, everyone you were before. It means living in fear that someday, somehow, someone will recognize you." Evelyn's hands twisted in the blanket. She thought about her mother in Chicago, who probably thought she was dead by now. Thought about her little sister who'd be 15 now, growing up without her. Thought about the life she'd had before, the political science degree she'd never finish, the future she'd planned that had been ripped away. "Why are you giving me a choice at all?" she asked. "You could just use the information I've already given you. You don't need my permission." Dustin's expression softened, just slightly. "Because you've had enough choices taken away from you. Because you deserve agency over your own life. And because if you're going to help me destroy Vincent Marcello, I need you to choose it. I need you to want it." He pulled the chair over, sat down so they were eye level, his elbows on his knees. "I've been doing this a long time, Evelyn. I've learned that revenge only works when the person seeking it is all in. Half-hearted vengeance gets people killed. But you, I've seen the way you look when you talk about that place. I've seen the steel underneath all that trauma. You're not just a victim. You're a survivor. And survivors make the best allies." Evelyn studied his face. He believed what he was saying. She could see it in the certainty of his gaze, the conviction in his voice. He genuinely thought she could be useful, thought she could be strong. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity. She could barely walk without getting dizzy, could barely sleep without nightmares, could barely look at herself in the mirror without seeing all the ways she'd been broken. But another part of her, the part that had survived 2 years of hell, the part that had planned and executed her escape, the part that had dragged her broken body 3 miles through Manhattan winter to find help, that part whispered, "He's right. What would it look like?" she asked. "If I stayed, if I helped you, you'd live here, under protection, 24-hour security. My best people. You'd work with my intelligence team. Help us map out Vincent's entire operation, every location we don't know about, every client we haven't identified, every weakness we can exploit. When we're ready, we hit everything at once. Fast, coordinated, overwhelming. We free the girls, eliminate his soldiers, seize his assets, and make sure he can never rebuild. And Vincent? Dustin's smile was cold enough to frost glass. Vincent is mine. Evelyn looked down at her hands. They were shaking slightly, but not from fear. From something else. Something that felt almost like anger. Like rage. Like 2 years of powerlessness finally finding an outlet. She thought about the basement. About the girls still trapped there. Still living her nightmare. About Marco's laugh when he brought new girls in. About Tony's nervous energy when things went wrong. About the clients who paid for access to broken women and walked away clean. She thought about Vincent Marcello, the man who'd built an empire on suffering, who'd looked at human beings and seen only merchandise. She thought about witness protection, about hiding, about spending the rest of her life afraid, and she thought about fire. About watching everything Vincent had built turn to ash, about standing in the ruins and knowing she'd helped make it happen. When she looked up, her decision was made. She could see Dustin recognize it in her expression, could see him sit back slightly, waiting. "I have terms," she said, her voice steadier than it had been since she collapsed in that hotel lobby. "Name them. I don't just want to help plan this. I want to be there when it happens. I want to see those girls walk out free. I want to see Vincent's operation destroyed with my own eyes." Dustin nodded slowly. "Agreed. And when it's over, when Vincent is finished, I want to watch him lose everything. Not just his business, everything. His money, his power, his reputation, his life. I want him to know that I'm the reason. That the girl he thought was just inventory is the one who brought him down." Something flickered in Dustin's eyes. Approval, maybe? Or recognition of a kindred spirit. "I can arrange that." Evelyn took a deep breath. "Then I'm in. Let's burn it all down." Dustin stood, extended his hand. She looked at it for a moment. At the tattoos on his knuckles. At the rings that probably cost more than her college tuition. At the hand of a man who killed people for a living. Then she reached out and shook it. The partnership was sealed. The training started on day 10. Evelyn woke to find workout clothes laid out on the chair by her bed. Her size, still tagged. Beneath them was a note in sharp, precise handwriting. "Gym. 8 a.m. Don't be late." She'd expected some kind of combat training. Expected Dustin to throw her into a ring and teach her how to fight. What she got instead was an hour of stretching and breathing exercises while he watched from across the room, correcting her form, teaching her how to ground herself in her body. "You can't fight effectively if you're not present," he explained, demonstrating a breathing pattern. "Right now, part of you is still in that basement. We need to bring you all the way back." It took 3 days before he'd let her throw a punch. When he finally did, he spent an hour just teaching her how to stand. Weight distribution, balance, center of gravity, the mechanics of power. "Fighting isn't about strength," he said, adjusting her stance with careful, impersonal touches that he always telegraphed before making. "It's about leverage. Efficiency. Using your opponent's force against them. A woman your size can drop a man twice your weight if you know where to hit and how." By the second week, Evelyn could break out of basic holds, could strike hard enough to make the practice dummy shudder, could move through the defensive sequences Dustin taught her without thinking. Muscle memory overriding fear. She was getting stronger. She could feel it. Could feel her body remembering what it meant to be powerful instead of powerless. Marcus Chen joined them on day 15. Dustin's lieutenant was shorter than his boss, compact and efficient, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He carried himself like a man who'd seen combat and come out the other side harder for it. He spread blueprints across the table in what Dustin called the strategy room. Floor plans, satellite imagery, surveillance photos, the basement operation, and 2 other locations Dustin's people had identified. "We've been watching Vincent's movements for 3 months, Marcus explained, pointing to red marks on the map. "He's expanded since your raid, boss. Got 3 active locations now, plus 2 warehouses we think he's using for storage and transport." Evelyn leaned over the table, studying the images. Her heart rate kicked up when she recognized the basement layout, but she forced herself to focus, forced herself to look at it tactically instead of emotionally. "This is wrong," she said, pointing to the blueprint. "There's another room here. A storage area behind the punishment room. That's where they keep the drugs. Sedatives, mostly. They use them on the new girls, The ones who fight too much. Marcus made a note. What else? She spent the next 2 hours marking corrections on the blueprints. Guard positions that were wrong. Rotation schedules that had changed. Security measures that weren't documented. The panic button under the supervisor's desk. The camera blind spot near the back entrance. The fact that Marco always took his smoke break at 3 p.m., leaving only 3 guards on the floor. He's obsessively punctual about it, she said. Sets an alarm on his phone. 12 minutes exactly, then back inside. It's the best window you'll have for entry. Dustin and Marcus exchanged glances. You're sure about the timing? I watched him do it every single day for 2 years. I'm sure. By the time they finished, the blueprints were covered in her annotations. Marcus looked at them with something like respect. This is good intelligence, he said. Really good. Vincent's security isn't as tight as he thinks it is. After Marcus left, Dustin walked Evelyn back to her room. It had become routine, these evening walks through the estate. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Tonight felt different, though. Heavier. You did well today, Dustin said as they reached her door. I almost had a panic attack looking at those blueprints. Almost. But you didn't. You pushed through it. Evelyn turned to face him. In the dim hallway light, his tattoos looked like shadows. Something flickered across his face. You learn to carry them differently. The weight doesn't change, but you get stronger. She wanted to ask what memories he carried. What made a man like him choose violence as a profession? But before she could, her phone buzzed. She'd been given one a few days ago, pre-programmed with only essential contacts. The screen showed a news alert. She opened it without thinking. Saw the headline. Woman's body found in East River. Suspected trafficking victim. The hallway tilted. The phone slipped from her hand. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except see that headline over and over, imagining which girl it was. Was it Sarah, who'd had a daughter on the outside? Was it Maria, who'd been there even longer than Evelyn? Was it one of the new girls whose names she'd never learned? Her chest tightened. The air in her lungs turned to concrete. She was back in the basement, hearing the screams from the punishment room, knowing that girls who went in sometimes didn't come out, knowing that bodies disappeared and no one cared enough to look for them. Hands on her shoulders. Firm but gentle. Dustin's voice cutting through the spiral. Evelyn, look at me. Eyes on me, nowhere else. She tried. Failed. Tried again. Managed to focus on his face. Breathe with me. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. With me now. She followed his breathing, matched her rhythm to his. Felt the panic start to recede like a tide pulling back from shore. When she could speak again, her voice came out broken. Someone else died, while I've been here, safe, eating good food, sleeping in a comfortable bed. Someone else died. That's not your fault. I escaped. I could have gone to the police. Could have told them everything immediately. Instead, I ran and hid and let more girls suffer. Dustin's hands tightened on her shoulders. Listen to me. You did what you had to do to survive. Going to the police wouldn't have helped. Vincent owns half the precinct. They would have sent you right back to him. You know that. I should have done something. You are doing something. Right now. Everything you've told us, everything you're helping us plan, that's going to save lives. More lives than going to the police ever would have. Evelyn looked up at him, saw something in his expression she hadn't seen before. Understanding. Real, deep understanding. You know what this feels like, she said. The guilt. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, my father used to beat my mother. Started when I was 6. I'd hear it through the walls. Glass breaking, her crying, him yelling. I was too small to stop it, too weak. So I'd hide in my room and tell myself that tomorrow I'd be brave. Tomorrow I'd protect her. His jaw tightened. When I was 16, he put her in the hospital. Broken ribs, fractured skull, internal bleeding. That's when Vincent found me, taught me how to fight, how to be strong. 3 months later, I walked into my father's office and broke both his hands. Told him if he ever touched her again, I'd kill him. Did he stop? Yes. But by then, she'd already had 16 years of abuse. 16 years I could have ended sooner if I'd been stronger, braver, better. I carry that every day. Evelyn felt tears sliding down her face. How do you live with it? By making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. By drawing lines and enforcing them. By becoming someone who protects instead of someone who hides. He released her shoulders, stepped back. You're already doing that, Evelyn. You're already becoming that person. She wiped her face. I don't feel like it. You will. When Vincent's operation is ash. When those girls walk free. When you're standing in the ruins of everything he built. You'll feel it then. She wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. Get some rest, Dustin said, picking up her phone from where it had fallen. Tomorrow we start planning the actual raid. Marcus found something in Vincent's financials. A pattern. We're close now. He handed her the phone and walked away, leaving her alone with her guilt and her grief and the first fragile threads of something that might someday become hope. And trust me, the training is just the beginning. What comes next will test everything Evelyn's learned and force her to make impossible choices. If you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Because the next chapter, the photograph was taken on day 23. Evelyn stood in the estate's garden, morning light catching the gold in her natural hair, wearing jeans and a sweater that actually fit. She'd gained back 15 pounds. The bruises had faded to yellow-green shadows. The cigarette burns on her wrists were visible, but healing. She looked alive, strong, protected. Dustin showed her the image before sending it. Last chance to change your mind. Once Vincent sees this, there's no going back. He'll know you're with me. He'll know you talked. Evelyn studied the photo. Studied the woman in it who looked like her but stronger, harder. Someone who'd survived and chosen to fight back. Send it. Dustin's finger hovered over his phone for just a moment. Then he pressed send. The message went to a burner number Marcus had confirmed belonged to Vincent's personal phone. No words, no explanation. Just the photograph and a simple caption. She's mine now. How long before he responds? Evelyn asked. Hours, maybe days. Vincent doesn't react immediately. He plans, calculates, finds the angle that hurts most. Dustin pocketed his phone. But he will respond. Men like Vincent can't let challenges go unanswered. They didn't have to wait long. 18 hours later, Dustin's phone lit up with calls. Marcus first, his voice tight with controlled fury. Then Tommy. Then 3 other voices Evelyn didn't recognize, all saying the same thing in different ways. Vincent had sent a message back. Dustin's face went completely still as he listened. The kind of still that preceded violence. When he finally spoke, his voice was ice. I'm on my way. Secure the scene. No one talks to the police until I get there. He ended the call and looked at Evelyn. I have to go. Stay here. Don't leave the estate. Marcus is sending extra security. What happened? Vincent happened. He was out the door before she could ask anything else, moving with lethal purpose. Evelyn stood in the empty strategy room, her stomach knotting with dread, and waited. The news broke 3 hours later. She saw it on her phone, the alert cutting through the silence like a knife. 2 dead in Brooklyn. Restaurant fire. Arson suspected. Her hands shook as she opened the article. The restaurant was called Lucia's. Italian. Family-owned for 3 generations. The photo showed firefighters hosing down a blackened storefront, smoke still rising from the wreckage. 2 employees had been inside doing prep work when the fire started. They'd never made it out. Evelyn's phone rang. Dustin, I'm guessing you saw the news. Was it Vincent? Yes. His voice was flat, dead. The restaurant is mine. Legitimate business. My mother's favorite place. She used to take me there every Sunday when I was a kid. Vincent knew that. Evelyn heard sirens in the background, voices shouting orders. The people who died? Carlos Martinez, line cook, 23 years old, saving up to bring his parents over from Ecuador. And Jennifer Park, sous chef, 31, 2 kids at home. A pause. She heard him take a breath, heard the effort it took to keep his voice level. They were good people, Evelyn. They had nothing to do with this world. They just needed jobs. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be ready. Because this is what Vincent does. He doesn't come at you directly. He goes after the people around you. The innocents. The ones who can't fight back. The background noise changed. A car door closing, engine starting. He's trying to draw me out. Make me emotional. Make me reckless. It's a tactic he taught me, actually. Hit them where they're soft. Watch them break. Will it work? No. The word was absolute. Final. Because I learned from the best, and I've gotten better at this game than he ever was. Vincent wants a war? He'll get one. But it'll be fought on my terms, not his. Evelyn heard the cold calculation in his voice and recognized it. It was the same tone he used when analyzing intelligence, when planning operations, when deciding who lived and who died. What do we do now? Now? Now we accelerate the timeline. Vincent's getting desperate if he's hitting my legitimate businesses. Means we're hurting him more than we thought. Marcus is pulling together everything we need for the raid. 2 days. Maybe 3. Then we hit every location simultaneously. That fast? Vincent won't expect it. He thinks he's put me on my heels. Thinks I'll spend time mourning, securing my assets, playing defense. Instead, we're going on offense. Complete surprise. The car engine revved. Dustin was driving fast. Probably too fast. But Evelyn doubted any cop would pull him over. There's something else you need to know, he continued. Vincent sent another message. Left it spray-painted on the restaurant's back wall where the fire didn't reach. 3 words. Return my property. Evelyn's blood went cold. He means me. Yes. But here's what's important. He said property, not by name. Means he doesn't know who you are yet. Doesn't have your identity. We have that advantage still. How long before he figures it out? Hard to say. He's got resources. Street cameras, informants, people on various payrolls. But Marcus has been scrubbing your presence from official records. Far as the system knows, Evelyn Braun disappeared 2 years ago and was never seen again. Evelyn walked to the window, looked out at the manicured grounds, the high walls, the security cameras she'd learned to spot. A gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. 2 innocent people are dead because of me. No. Dustin's voice cut through her guilt like a blade. 2 innocent people are dead because of Vincent. Because he's a monster who burns down restaurants and kills civilians to make a point. Don't you dare take that weight on yourself. If I hadn't escaped. If you hadn't escaped, you'd be dead by now, and Vincent would still be trafficking girls. Carlos and Jennifer might still be alive, but dozens of other people would be suffering. You can't think like that. You can't calculate morality by measuring suffering against suffering. It'll drive you insane. He was right. She knew he was right, but it didn't make the guilt any lighter. I'm coming back to the estate, Dustin said. Should be there in 20 minutes. We're calling an emergency meeting. Everyone who's involved in this operation. We're going to plan this raid down to the last detail, and then we're going to execute it perfectly. No mistakes. No collateral damage. No chances for Vincent to slip away. And after, when Vincent realizes what we've done, he'll come for both of us with everything he has left. Which is why we need to make sure he doesn't have anything left. We don't just hurt him, Evelyn. We destroy him completely, burn every bridge, eliminate every asset. Leave him with nothing but the clothes on his back and nowhere to run. Evelyn thought about Carlos Martinez and his dreams of bringing his parents to America. Thought about Jennifer Park's 2 children who'd never see their mother again. Thought about the girls still trapped in that basement, waiting for rescue that they didn't know was coming. 2 days, she said. Then we end this. 2 days, Dustin agreed. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be intense. We're going to war, and I need you sharp. He hung up. Evelyn stood at the window, watching the sun set over the estate's walls, painting everything in shades of blood, orange, and shadow. Vincent Marcello had made a mistake. He'd thought killing innocents would make Dustin hesitate, would make him cautious. Instead, he'd just given them both one more reason to burn his empire to the ground. 2 days. Then fire. The raid was planned for 3:14 a.m. on a Wednesday. Marco's shift. The time when exhaustion hit hardest, when attention wandered, when even the most disciplined guards got sloppy. Evelyn sat in the command van 2 blocks away, watching feeds from 8 different cameras Marcus had positioned around the target building. Her role was intelligence only. Dustin had been absolute about that. She stayed in the van, monitored communications, provided real-time guidance on the layout. She did not, under any circumstances, enter the building. She'd agreed. Mostly because arguing would have delayed the operation, and 12 women didn't have time for her ego. Team 1 in position. Marcus's voice crackled through the comms. East entrance clear. Team 2 ready. Another voice. Tommy. West side secure. Dustin's voice cut through, calm and controlled. Remember, we move fast but careful. Priority 1 is the victims. Priority 2 is capturing Vincent's people alive for questioning. We need information on his other operations. Evelyn watched the feeds as dark figures moved into position. Dustin had brought 20 men. Ex-military, Marcus had explained. People who knew how to breach a building without killing everyone inside. Smoke deployed, Marcus reported. On the screens, Evelyn watched gray clouds pour through the basement's ventilation system, exactly as planned. The guards would panic, would focus on the smoke, wouldn't see the entry teams until it was too late. Breaching now. The feeds showed controlled chaos. Doors kicked in simultaneously from 3 directions. Flashbangs, shouting, guards dropping to the ground, hands on heads. overwhelmed by superior numbers and tactics. It was beautiful, precise, exactly as Dustin had planned it. First room clear. 6 hostiles detained, moving to victim holding area. Evelyn's heart hammered as she watched Team 1 enter the main room where she'd spent 2 years. Watched the girls' faces on camera, the confusion and terror transforming to hope as masked men started cutting zip ties, speaking in calm voices, wrapping blankets around shoulders. 12 victims secured, all alive. Medical says they're mobile. Team 2? Status? Back rooms clear. Found the drug storage Evelyn mentioned. Cataloging now. It was working. Everything was working exactly as planned. That should have been Evelyn's first warning. Boss, we've got a problem. Marcus's voice had changed, gone sharp. The guard count is wrong. We've only detained 8. Should be 12 on night shift. Silence on the comms. Evelyn watched Dustin on the feed. Saw him go still. Where are the other 4? Unknown. Searching now. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. She pulled up the blueprint on her tablet, cross-referenced it with the camera feeds, tried to spot what they were missing. Dustin, she said into her comms. The sub-basement. The incinerator room. Did anyone check there? Team 3. Confirmed sub-basement clear. Negative, boss. Doors locked. We assumed it was empty based on intel. Break it down. Now. Evelyn watched Team 3 move to the sub-basement door. Watched them place a breaching charge. Watched the door blow inward. Watched them stumble back as automatic gunfire erupted from inside. Contact. We've got hostiles in the sub-basement. 4, maybe 5 shooters. The feeds dissolved into chaos. Teams repositioning. Returning fire. Trying to suppress the shooters while keeping the victims clear. It was a crossfire. A killing box. And Dustin was moving toward it. Boss, stay back. We've got this. But Dustin was already in motion, pushing past his own men, positioning himself between the sub-basement entrance and the exit where the victims were being evacuated. Evelyn watched in horror as she realized what he was doing. He was making himself the target, drawing fire away from the escaping women. Dustin, get out of there! She shouted into the comms. He didn't respond, just kept firing, kept moving, kept putting his body between the shooters and the innocents. The last victim cleared the exit, Tommy and 3 others physically dragging girls who were too terrified to run on their own. All 12 accounted for. All 12 safe. Victims are out! Fall back! But the gunfire from the sub-basement intensified. And then Evelyn saw it on the feeds, saw what she'd missed. The sub-basement had a second exit, one that wasn't on any blueprint she'd seen. Figures emerged behind Team 3. 6 men, armed, moving with military precision. Behind you! Evelyn screamed. Too late. Team 3 went down under a hail of gunfire. Not killed, she could see them moving, wounded but alive but out of the fight. And Dustin was cut off. Separated from his men. Surrounded. She watched him drop the 2 shooters closest to him. Watched him move with lethal efficiency. Every shot precise. Every movement calculated. He was magnificent. Terrifying. Exactly as dangerous as his reputation claimed. But there were too many. Even as he dropped targets, more emerged from that hidden exit. 10 men. 12. 15. This wasn't a trafficking operations security. This was an army. It's a trap, Marcus said, his voice hollow. Vincent knew we were coming. Evelyn watched Dustin's ammunition run out. Watched him transition to hand-to-hand combat. Brutal and efficient. Watched him put 3 men down before sheer numbers overwhelmed him. They swarmed him. Drove him to the ground. She saw his head snap back from a rifle butt. Saw him go limp. Boss is down. I repeat, boss is down. Marcus was already moving, rallying the remaining teams for extraction. But Vincent's men were faster. They dragged Dustin's unconscious body through that hidden exit and disappeared. The feeds showed an empty basement. 8 detained guards, 12 freed victims, and no Dustin Johnson. Evelyn sat frozen in the command van, watching the screens, unable to process what had just happened. Marcus climbed into the van, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, his expression grim. We need to move, now. This location's compromised. Where did they take him? I don't know. But Vincent will make contact. This is what he wanted, what he planned for. Evelyn's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered it without thinking. Vincent Marcello's voice was smooth, cultured, almost kind. Hello, Evelyn. Yes, I know your name now. I know everything. Where you're from, who your family is, what you look like when you're healthy and strong instead of half dead. A pause. You're very pretty in that garden photograph. Her blood went cold. I have something of yours. Well, something you've become quite attached to. Young Dustin. He's sleeping right now. The boys were a bit rough with him, I'm afraid. But he'll wake up soon. And when he does, we're going to have a conversation about respect and consequences. If you hurt him, you'll what? You're a victim, dear. A pretty broken thing that Dustin tried to save because he has this annoying hero complex. You have no power here. Vincent's voice hardened. But you do have a choice. Come to me. Trade yourself for him. I'll even let him live, which is more mercy than he showed my operation. Or stay hiding behind Marcus and his guns, and I'll ship Dustin back to you in pieces. You have 6 hours to decide. He sent an address. A warehouse in Red Hook. Then the line went dead. Marcus was shaking his head before she even looked at him. No, absolutely not. It's another trap. Vincent will kill you both. He'll kill Dustin if I don't go. Dustin knew the risks. He wouldn't want you to sacrifice yourself. Evelyn looked at the blank screens. Thought about Dustin teaching her to breathe through panic attacks. Thought about him sharing his own trauma to help her carry hers. Thought about the way he'd positioned himself between the shooters and the escaping victims without hesitation. Thought about the promise she'd made to herself. No more hiding. No more being powerless. I'm not sacrificing myself, she said quietly. I'm finishing this. Get me the warehouse layout. Get me weapons. Get me everything you have on Vincent's security. Marcus stared at her. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe. But Dustin's not dying alone in a warehouse because of me. Vincent thinks I'm a victim. Thinks I'm weak. Let's show him exactly how wrong he is. She had 6 hours to plan a rescue. 6 hours to become the person Dustin believed she could be. 6 hours to prove that victims could become warriors. The clock was ticking. Dustin woke to pain and the smell of rust. His head throbbed where they'd hit him. His wrists burned from zip ties cutting into skin, and his ribs screamed with every breath. Cracked, probably. Maybe broken. He was zip-tied to a chair in the center of a warehouse that had seen better days. Empty shipping containers lined the walls. Overhead lights flickered. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Classic Vincent. Always had a flair for the dramatic. Footsteps echoed across concrete. Vincent Marcello emerged from the shadows, looking exactly as Dustin remembered. Silver at his temples now, but still fit. Still moving with that predatory grace. Still wearing $1,000 suits to torture sessions. You're awake. Good. Vincent pulled up a chair, sat down just out of kicking range. We have so much to discuss. Dustin said nothing. Talking would only feed Vincent's ego, and he needed to conserve energy. Needed to stay alert for opportunities. You disappointed me, Dustin. I raised you. Taught you everything you know. Treated you like the son my own boy could never be. And how do you repay me? By destroying my business. By turning half my soldiers against me. By stealing my property. She's not property. Vincent's smile was indulgent. She? Oh, you mean Evelyn. Pretty thing. Fought hard in the beginning. Took almost 3 months to break her properly. Though apparently not well enough, since she managed to escape. He leaned forward. Tell me, did you enjoy playing hero? Did it make you feel good, saving the damaged girl? Dustin tested the zip ties. Industrial strength. His knife was gone. Obviously. Gun too. They'd stripped him of everything except his clothes. The silent treatment. How tedious. Vincent stood, began pacing. Here's what's going to happen. Evelyn will come for you. I made sure of that, gave her an address, a deadline, a choice. And she'll come. Because damaged girls always fall in love with their saviors. It's pathetically predictable. He paused at one of the shipping containers, ran his hand along the corroded metal. When she arrives, I'll give you both a choice. She comes back to work for me, and you get to live. You'll be broken, certainly, missing a few pieces, but alive. Or she refuses, and I kill you both. Either way, I win. You think you've won before, Dustin said, finally speaking. Thought you'd won when you stole my father's territory, when you built your trafficking empire, when you set that trap tonight. How'd all those victories work out for you? Vincent's expression darkened. Tonight worked out perfectly. I have you. My operation relocates to a new facility by morning, and the girl you tried to save comes crawling back to me voluntarily. I'd call that a comprehensive victory. You're missing something. Am I? You taught me to plan for every contingency, to have backup plans for my backup plans, To never assume victory until I'm standing in the ashes of my enemy's life. Dustin smiled, tasting blood from his split lip. You taught me well, Vincent. Better than you realize. Doubt flickered across Vincent's face. Just for a moment, then it was gone, replaced by cold certainty. You're bluffing. You're zip-tied to a chair in my warehouse, surrounded by my men, with no way out. What contingency saves you now? Her. The word hung in the air like a prophecy. Vincent laughed. The broken girl? The victim? You're betting your life on someone who spent 2 years too terrified to fight back? I'm betting my life on someone who survived 2 years of your torture and still had the strength to escape. On someone who chose vengeance over safety. On someone who's been learning from me for 3 weeks. Dustin held Vincent's gaze. You broke her body, but you never touched her spirit. That's your mistake. Vincent pulled a gun from his jacket, pressed it against Dustin's temple. Last words before I decide you're more trouble than you're worth? She's already here. The overhead light exploded in a shower of sparks. Vincent spun toward the sound, gun raised, as the warehouse plunged into semi-darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in, dim and red, casting everything in shades of blood. Show yourself, Vincent shouted. Evelyn's voice came from the shadows, calm and clear. You wanted me back. Here I am. She stepped into the light wearing black tactical gear Marcus must have provided. Her hair was tied back, no fear in her eyes, no hesitation in her movements. She held a Glock 19, both hands on the grip, exactly as Dustin had taught her. Vincent's gun shifted from Dustin to Evelyn. There she is, my lost property. Come home at last. I'm not your property. I never was. Brave words from a broken thing. Vincent's finger tightened on the trigger. Drop the gun or I kill him. Then kill him. Evelyn's voice didn't waver. Because I'm not dropping this weapon. I'm not going back into a cage, and I'm not letting you walk away from what you've done. Vincent's smile was cruel. You don't have it in you. You're a victim, not a killer. You couldn't even fight back when Evelyn fired. The first shot took Vincent in the shoulder, spinning him back. His gun clattered to the concrete. He stared at the spreading red on his expensive suit, shock replacing arrogance. That's for me, Evelyn said, advancing. For 2 years in a basement. For every time you called me property. For every girl you broke. The second shot hit his chest, driving him to his knees. Blood bubbled at his lips. He tried to speak, couldn't. That's for Carlos and Jennifer. For everyone else you killed to protect your empire. For every innocent who died because you decided their lives meant nothing. She stood over him now, gun aimed at his head. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were clear. And this is for the future. For making sure you never hurt anyone again. For ending the nightmare. For choosing to be the one who pulls the trigger instead of the one who hides. The third shot echoed through the warehouse. Vincent Marcello collapsed, lifeless, onto the cold concrete. Evelyn lowered the gun. Her hands started shaking now that it was over, adrenaline draining away. She looked at Dustin, her eyes asking a question she couldn't voice. Dustin felt something warm expand in his chest. Pride, respect, recognition of strength that had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. That's my girl, he said softly. The warehouse doors burst open. Marcus and 6 men flooded in, weapons raised, securing the space. They'd been waiting for Evelyn's signal, just as planned, just as Dustin had known they would be, because he'd taught her to never go into a fight without backup. Marcus cut Dustin's zip ties while 2 of his men checked Vincent's body, confirmed the kill, started securing the warehouse. Evelyn still stood frozen, the gun hanging at her side, staring at what she'd done. Dustin stood, ignored the screaming protest from his ribs, and walked to her. Gently took the gun from her hands, set it aside, then pulled her against his chest, careful of his injuries, letting her shake against him. You did good, he murmured. You saved my life. You ended a monster. You chose strength. I'm proud of you. She was crying now, silent tears soaking into his shirt. Not grief for Vincent, grief for the girl she'd been, for the innocence that could never be recovered, for the weight of taking a life, even a life that deserved ending. It's over, she whispered. It's finally over. Yes, Dustin said. It's over. You're free. And you made yourself free. No one gave that to you. You took it. Marcus approached, phone in hand. Boss, we've got teams hitting Vincent's other locations now. No resistance. Word spread fast about what happened here. His whole organization is collapsing. Dustin nodded, still holding Evelyn. The trafficking victims, all secured. Medical team standing by. Social services contacted. They'll be taken care of. Good. Dustin looked down at Evelyn. At this woman who'd survived hell and come out the other side forged into something unbreakable. Let's go home. She looked up at him. Home? Home, he confirmed. The estate. Where you're safe. Where we figure out what comes next. Together. Evelyn nodded, wiped her eyes, and let him lead her out of the warehouse. Behind them, Marcus's team secured the scene, documented everything, began the process of dismantling Vincent Marcello's empire piece by piece. The war was over. The monster was dead. And two people forever changed by violence walked into the night, ready to begin again. This is the moment where everything changes. Not just for Evelyn and Dustin, but for everyone watching who's ever had to fight their way back from darkness. If this story means something to you, hit subscribe and be part of a community that believes in second chances and hard-won hope. Comment and tell me. What would you build from the ashes? 3 months later, Dustin still had nightmares about the warehouse. Not about Vincent or the gun or the moment he'd thought he might die. About the seconds before Evelyn pulled the trigger, when he'd seen the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of a human life against justice. He'd put her in a position where she had to kill, and some nights he woke up wondering if he'd destroyed something essential in her by doing so. Then he'd hear her moving through the estate, coffee brewing at 5 a.m. before her classes, and he'd remember that she'd chosen this, chosen strength over safety, chosen to become someone who protected instead of someone who hid. Dr. Romano had kept him on bed rest for 2 weeks. 3 cracked ribs, a concussion, and enough contusions to make movement agony. Evelyn had visited every day, sitting in the chair by his bed, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in the same space, healing together. The territory consolidation had been surprisingly smooth. With Vincent dead and his operation exposed, most of his soldiers had either fled the city or approached Marcus, looking for terms. Dustin had been selective. The ones involved in trafficking were handed to the FBI along with enough evidence to guarantee convictions. The ones who'd been kept in the dark about Vincent's side business were offered a choice: legitimate work or leave New York. Most chose to stay. Turned out a lot of men preferred security jobs and warehouse management to constant violence. Dustin's father had called from his retirement in Florida. One conversation. 5 minutes. I heard Vincent's dead. Heard you did it. Good. Should have done it myself years ago. Then he'd hung up. That was as close to approval as Dustin would ever get from the old man. The trafficking survivors had been the priority. All 15 from the main location, plus 23 others found when they'd raided Vincent's remaining facilities. Marcus had worked with federal authorities to provide medical care, therapy, legal assistance, and housing. 8 had family to return to. The others were placed in protective programs or transitional housing. Evelyn had visited some of them. Not all, she wasn't ready for that, but enough to offer what comfort she could. To tell them that survival was possible, that they could rebuild. She'd enrolled at City College on week 6, social work program. Part-time initially, until she built up her strength. Her advisor had looked at her transcripts from before, seen the gap, and asked careful questions about where she'd been. Evelyn had simply said, "I was held against my will. Now I'm not. And I want to help others who've been through the same thing." The advisor had handed her an application for emergency financial aid and asked no further questions. Dustin had offered to pay her tuition. She'd refused, had instead applied for grants, scholarships, victim assistance funds. "I need to do this myself," she'd explained. "Need to prove I can stand on my own." He'd understood, had backed off, had simply made sure she had reliable transportation and a security detail that kept a respectful distance. They'd fallen into a rhythm. She studied. He restructured his organization. They had dinner together most nights when her class schedule allowed. Sometimes they talked about the past. Sometimes they planned for the future. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. Two people who understood trauma in ways most never would. On week 10, Evelyn had approached him with a laptop and a spreadsheet. "I've been thinking about the other survivors. The ones who don't have family. Who can't go back to their old lives. They need more than just temporary housing. What are you suggesting? A safe house. Not government-run. Not nonprofit with insufficient funding. Something we control. Where women can stay as long as they need. Where they can heal, get education, learn skills, rebuild their lives without pressure or deadlines." Dustin had looked at the spreadsheet. At the budget she'd calculated. At the requirements for licensing and legal compliance. She'd done her research. How much? Initial property purchase? Renovations? 6 months operating costs? About $2 million. He'd pulled out his phone and called his accountant. Wire $2 million into a new account. I'll send you the details. Then to Evelyn. Find us a property. She'd found one in 3 days. A Brooklyn townhouse that had been a boarding house in the 1922nd. Abandoned for a decade. Structurally sound but cosmetically destroyed. 4 stories, 8 bedrooms, large kitchen, small yard. Perfect. Now Dustin stood in the empty living room, dust motes dancing in afternoon light, while Evelyn walked through the space with an architect and a contractor, explaining her vision. Bedrooms upstairs, obviously. Each needs a lock that works from the inside only. Security, but also autonomy. Women need to feel in control of their space. She pointed to the back of the first floor. Kitchen here. Communal, but large enough that people can cook together or separately. Trauma makes people need different things. The architect made notes while the contractor measured walls and checked structural elements. The basement could be a common area, Evelyn continued. Therapy space, maybe? Or just a place to exist without pressure to interact. And the top floor? She paused, looking up at the damaged ceiling. That's for staff. Live-in counselor, security, medical personnel, people who understand this world. You've thought this through, the architect said, clearly impressed. I spent 2 years thinking about what I'd need to heal. This is that. For others. After the architect and contractor left with their plans and promises to return with quotes, Dustin and Evelyn stood alone in the empty townhouse. Sunset painted the walls gold through broken windows. This is ambitious, Dustin said. Running a safe house, managing staff, dealing with trauma daily while working on your own. I know. You sure you want this? Evelyn turned to face him. She looked different now than she had 3 months ago. Stronger, fuller, more present. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something fiercer. Purpose, maybe? I killed a man, she said quietly. Took a life. That's not something I can undo or take back. I carry that now. Will carry it forever. She walked to the window, looked out at the Brooklyn street, at normal people living normal lives. But this is how we make it mean something. Vincent's dead, his operations destroyed, and in its place, we build something that protects, instead of destroys. Something that helps instead of hurts. She looked back at him. This is how we make sure those deaths, all that violence, all that pain, it has to count for something good. Dustin crossed the room, stood beside her at the window. We. What? You said we. You're including me in this. Of course. You think I can run a safe house alone? I need your resources, your security expertise, your ability to navigate legal systems and bureaucracy. She smiled slightly. Plus, you're surprisingly good at understanding trauma. Must be all that practice with your own. He should have been offended. Instead, he found himself laughing. Real laughter. The kind that came from someplace genuine. Partners then, he said, offering his hand. She looked at his hand, at the tattoos on his knuckles, at the scars and calluses from years of violence, at the hand of a man who'd killed and stolen and built an empire on moral compromises. Then she took it. Partners, she agreed. But I'm naming it. And we're doing therapy. Both of us. If we're going to help others heal, we need to work on healing ourselves. Deal. They stood there as the sun set, hands linked, looking out at the street. 2 people forever changed by violence. 2 people who'd chosen each other in the aftermath of trauma. 2 people building something new from the ashes of something terrible. So, what are you naming it? Dustin asked. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, thinking. Phoenix House. For rising from ashes. For transformation. For becoming something new after everything burns down. Phoenix House. Dustin repeated, testing the words. They fit. I like it. Good. Because I already ordered the sign. He laughed again. And she joined him. And for a moment the empty townhouse filled with the sound of 2 people who'd survived hell finding something like joy in planning a future. Outside, Brooklyn moved around them. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that in this broken building, 2 extraordinary people were choosing to build something protective and good. The past couldn't be changed. The violence couldn't be undone. The scars, physical and psychological, would remain. But the future? The future was still being written. And Evelyn Braun and Dustin Johnson were writing it together, one choice at a time, building something that might help others find their way back from darkness. Phoenix House, where survivors became warriors, where trauma became strength, where ashes became foundation for something beautiful. It was a beginning. Maybe not the one either of them would have chosen, but it was theirs, and that was enough.